Healthcare is a big deal to me. If I look cross or pissed or annoyed when I do these videos, it is probably because I am. Yesterday was a maddening day. I have to deal with a facility, if I'm being honest, one in which I don't particularly like, and one that I don't get along with all that well. And my schedule, be it someone who works at a radio station, goes to DC, have to get these shows because I need to make a certain amount in order to make a living, all of that stuff gets leverage against treatments and clinic. Because ultimately, I need to do that to live. And any back and forth with discrepancy with the facility itself makes my living more difficult. And it makes it more difficult in terms of physicality and feeling miserable. So that took place yesterday, meaning I was already annoyed. I then had a conversation with my mom, who was extremely perturbed because her mom, my grandmother, Medicaid was forcing her, doubling the amount for her to pay for somebody to sit with her. This is a medical expense, by the way. This is a woman who's worked as a teacher, one of the nicest people you would ever meet in your life, who's given her brains and her muscles to ensuring that the kids of this particular world will be better than what she left them. Meaning, she put all of her skills for the entire time in her life, and now she's in a situation where, for medical needs, she requires someone to sit with her. And the organization that was supposed to help her with that, meaning our government, has just told her she needs to pay twice as much as she was paying before, over $400 a month. I put this to you that the majority of people in this country don't have $500 in the bank, as is, and they want her to pay this perpetual emergency month after month after month. I've been in similar situations, be it 17 years old, being diagnosed with kidney failure, then having to find some way to make a living. Because under our laws, if you need health care, that health care, meaning for Medicare and Medicaid, is leveraged against how much you make, meaning you're in a donut hole. And as a 17-year-old, you're never going to make enough to pay for your own health care insurance because you're 17. You're just literally, well, at that point in school, but just getting out of school. By the same token, the government says if you make more than like $1,200 a month, you lose the secondary part of your health care, meaning you would have to pay 20% of your expenses, which, if you have any kind of medical illness, that can be racked up pretty quickly. Year after year after year after year of hospitalization, going from the time I was 17 all the way up until the point I was 30, having major surgeries, literally double, like two major surgeries, year after year for all of that time period. At some point, have doctors telling you, hey, if we do the surgery, you're not going to wake up from the table, or nurses prepping your mom. And this is more than one occasion that your kid is probably not going to walk out of here alive. My mom was telling me about this experience one time where I'm in the hospital. We've just had a hurricane. She's driving and she's listening to the radio, and these people are talking outright nonsense, or what she considered to be nonsense, because at this point, her priority was her kid, and all of these people are talking about this stupid shit on the radio. It was more acute to her. It mattered to her that much more because it was personal and direct. Same thing with my grandmother. She was apoplectic, and that's to put it mildly. And as she's my mom and that is my grandmother, I was the same. I don't like doing shows angry. And yeah, here we are. When I was 30, I remember losing my job, and while losing my job, also losing Medicare at the exact same time. Now, the reason is because after 3 years, when you have a transplant, supposedly you can take care of yourself at that point. The catch is no provision if you lose your job at the exact same time Medicare gives you your stamp of approval, while simultaneously losing a kidney at the same time. Meaning, at the time where healthcare mattered most, Medicare hit the skids, and so did the healthcare within the context of the company also hit the skids. We have a problem with healthcare in this country in the way that we go about it. In that situation, 30 years old, no healthcare, failing kidney, and lost the job. Now, they do say, hey, you could pay Cobra, which is what, $400 or $500 a month. I have no idea who pays that the moment that they don't have a job. The situation with my grandmother is not unique. The situation with me is not unique. This is a disaster that takes place all across the United States. I have met people who said they won't. In fact, it's worse. Pharmacists who interact with multiple patients who say they cut their insulin, or they don't take their insulin because they can't afford it. And ultimately, people who are on dialysis, many of them don't work. I would even go so far as to say the majority. And those people live in perpetual poverty because, again, the moment that you start, government gets involved and limits what you get from the standpoint of your healthcare, especially from the standpoint of cost. I am hard on candidates for the Medicare for All stuff. It is my litmus test. I don't want them to hide the ball. I want them to be honest with the American public when they are talking about it, because it is a massive, massive deal. Part of the reason that I support Sanders on this is because he has been honest with you. He's told you that your middle class taxes will go up, with the caveat that all of your other expenses go away. Meaning every situation that I found myself presented with within the course of my life dealing with work or job goes away. And that's not just for me. I'm saying that from the standpoint of all of these people and all of these dilemmas. The issue with my grandmother goes away. The person who I met at the facility, a nurse, by the way, telling me how the health insurance company wanted her husband, who needed cancer medication, to get an inferior product because it was cheaper for the health insurance company. That goes away. All of these dilemmas go away. Yes, your taxes go up. But the amount that you save dramatically increases. The amount that you bring home dramatically increases. Meaning, if you were making, let me say it this way. We make the argument, especially the people who are pushing for Medicare for All, the bill, not in concept, the bill, that ultimately the money that you pay to your health insurance companies is, for all intents and purposes, a tax. It is a tax that you don't even entirely know what that tax is going to be. And it's one that is regressive. You pay the same amount, roughly speaking, as your boss that might make 10 times, if not more, than you. Meaning you pay that tax entirely on your own and directly to the health insurance company. That is a tax. Every time you go to the doctor and pay a copay, that's a tax. When you go to the hospital and they charge you for the procedure and for the hospital itself, that's a tax. If you get hospitalized, that's a tax when you don't even know what you're going to end up paying. I have hospitalizations that went into the millions of dollars. Those taxes are unpredictable. Sanders' point is we need to pay that in a progressive way. We pay twice as much as everywhere else in the world because there is a profit-making enterprise at the center of that, who you pay that tax to and whose job is to deny you services. So your health insurance company will say, hey, I want you to go to this pharmacy that you don't want to go to because it's cheaper for us. The job that you work for will say, we're going to offer you these 2 new insurances because they're cheaper for us. Everything in this process has to do with profit for somebody or lessening costs for somebody. And in many respects, that has nothing to do with you and your needs as healthcare. Sanders' point is turn that into a progressive tax and have that paid to the government, where they will maximize your services because, again, it is not a for-profit enterprise. The argument is that the employer will pay an employer percentage. The employee will pay a payroll tax that will be dramatically less than what they were paying to the corporation, with the benefit of getting more services. This is true for 95% of the population. And if you make under $29,000, and $29,000 and less gets not included. I don't know how people bitch about this deal, especially in the 95%. Warren's plan is being disingenuous. She's hiding the ball. The head tax, whatever you want to think, is a middle class tax. Sanders is telling you there will be a percentage. She is not. I want to talk about that very specific issue because Sanders brings up an extremely good point, even though he is not making it as pointedly as I am. She is being dishonest with you, even in response to the middle class tax increase. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. This video will be quick, so like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. It would be fast, it would be pointed, and it would be made in a way that Sanders should have made his point and more acutely. $9,500 head tax on corporations and companies, 50 and more workers. Think about what that logically means. Boris Johnson says, I'm going to get rid of the backstop because he hates the backstop. And those conservatives and Tories hate the backstop. And you can't sign on to Theresa May's deal because of the backstop. And Bojo comes out with a deal that has a de facto backstop. So he can politically say, I got rid of the backstop. When the honest reality of it is that they will never leave. Meaning that backstop will be there forever. And more likely than not, Ireland will reunify based on the policy and what he knows will be the logical outcome of that policy. The same thing is true here. Warren is saying, I am not going to raise taxes on the middle class. Great. She's not going to do it. What about employers? What about employers? If you're putting $9,500 as a regressive tax, meaning for every person that a company brings in, not including independent contractors, there's something else I went through that in other video, and not including companies 50 and under. Now, those are problematic in and of itself because companies, as they change and conform to the law, they're going to start doing things that create a decrease or depression in regards to hiring. Meaning she's created a disincentive in hiring workers. And many of those workers will either be spun off as independent contractors or you will see an uptick in the number of independent contractors in order to conform to this law. That's secondary. My very point is basic in the level of dishonesty that is built into the argument that she's making with this policy proposal. She is not being serious. $9,500 head tax that she expects corporations to pay. Think about what that means. If you are making $30,000 a year, or you had a job that the person was making $30,000 a year, what is the company going to do when the company knows that, all right, I would typically pay $30,000 a year for this position, but now I have to take into account the head tax, the $9,500 head tax, that whether I'm paying $20,000, $30,000, or $200,000, I am going to have to pay an additional $9,500 for that worker. What that means is that for somebody who's making $30,000 a year, the company would have to accommodate another third for healthcare. What is the company going to do? The company is going to cut wages. The company is going to cut wages. While Warren is not going to own up to the fact that the head tax is a tax on workers, the fact of the matter is the employer themselves is going to conform to that bill and cut wages in order to compensate for the increase that they have to pay for the employer. A wage of $30,000. And if you put healthcare in it, where you're forcing $9,500 on the worker, that is almost a third of what the person was going to pay in wages. The employer, which I would strongly suggest to you, is going to cut that job from $30,000 to maybe $25,000, maybe even $23,000. But they will cut the wage themselves to compensate for what Warren is talking about, even if she's not doing it herself. Meaning, if we make the argument that money paid to a corporation is for all intents and purposes a tax that could just be paid to the government, pay less, get more. And that's our argument. That a tax doesn't have to be something specific to the government. It can also be to something that you are required to get by law at this point. Why isn't the same thing true for the employer cutting into the employee's wages? Meaning the employer is going to pass that tax on to the wages with a decrease in the wages of the workers. Sanders, who I wish was far more pointed on this, makes this point. Well, it depends on how you define a tax as I understand it. Senator Warren is placing what you might call a head tax of $9,500 on every employer who employs more than 60 people. That's supposed to be 50. And that means that the employer to hire a new person will cost an additional $9,500. Paying someone $30,000 or $40,000, yeah, that's a big chunk. I think that will probably be a very negative impact on creating those jobs and providing wages, increased wages and benefits for those workers. A company that was going to pay $30,000 to hire a person now has to pay pretty much an additional nearly $10,000, $9,500, meaning a third on top of whatever they're going to pay the worker. What do you think the employer is going to do? Think about it. A capitalist tries to save every nickel that they could possibly save. What do you think they're going to do? If you were a capitalist, what would you do? Ugh, she's forcing me to pay an extra $9,500 for this worker. All right, maybe I can cut the wage by $5,000 and I can cut this in some other way in order to bring the person on. So instead of the person getting $30,000 or $40,000, maybe they get $26,000. Maybe they get $32,000. I guess my point is, whether Elizabeth Warren wants to call that a payroll tax or not, it will be a payroll tax because the employer will pass it on to the worker and reduce wages, reduce benefits. She's hiding the ball. She's hiding the ball. I will not be the only one to say this. If you think I recognize this right off the bat, Joe Biden, Amy Klobuchar, all of these people who are on stage saying that Warren was being dishonest with her plan, they will also know it. The next video I would do will go through what Biden and what some of the other campaigns have said about this. Because whether she realizes it or not, she has signed her name to a payment plan that is flawed. That is flawed. And while I think on the debate stage she did an amazing job arguing single payer, that ends here. Because she's put out a policy proposal that is deviating significantly from the way Sanders was talking about paying for it. I mean, Sanders, for fuck's sake, even he had to come out and say, yeah, my plan is more progressive than that. I don't like this idea of a regressive tax. He goes further. So I think I have a better way, which is a payroll tax, which is far more progressive and, by the way, far more efficient. He's been thinking about this for 30 years. He's looked at the other countries around the globe. It's reason that they use a payroll tax to pay for the stuff. Our tax proposals exempts the first $29,000 of income. So if you make $50,000, you're paying taxes on $31,000. So you pay 44%, which will be $1,200 a year, which will be much, much less. Not only does the employer save, but so does the worker. And that worker brings that home in the sense of wages. The catch here is those wages, whatever Warren is saying, will not be seen because the employer themselves will cut those wages in a de facto way to compensate for what she's doing with this disaster plan. A unicorn, trying to purchase a unicorn. One last point. Think back to Amazon. When Amazon had to increase their wages to $15 an hour, what did they do? They conformed to the bill, to the law, meaning they conformed to the public pressure. But look back at what the Amazon workers were saying. Many of them were complaining because the way that Amazon conformed was to compensate in other ways, meaning like holiday workers or temporary workers, and to make changes according in those terms so they wouldn't necessarily get the blunt cost of the 15 in the terms of the way that we were thinking about it. Meaning, Amazon conformed to the law, and they were cutting here and tweaking there in order to ensure that they don't take the blunt cost of everybody across the board making $15 an hour and getting other benefits that they were getting in lieu. Look back to those conversations. Many of the people who were working there were greatly annoyed at what Amazon was doing, in the sense that some of them were getting hurt by the $15 an hour increase for others. I guarantee you, corporations whose main job is to maximize their profit will do the same. I'm not going to keep this. I just wanted to point this out. Like, share, subscribe. Balthazar, Bernie lied to you. My taxes will go up. I would not be able to keep my insurance, and I would not get better health care than I already do. HRC. Marcus Will. Sad state of affairs when we have to rely on Joe. Look, Joe Biden is hitting her on this, and Joe Biden is right when he hits her on this. Sanders, God knows I wish she would be a little stronger on this, but it may not matter. Ultimately, the other people who are on stage who thinks Warren is the person to beat are going to attack her like a bunch of piranhas. And she is going to have to defend this unicorn of a bill for all these other Democrats who thinks that she is the person to beat. Whether Sanders says anything or not, they will be comparing her to that same Bernie Sanders, and they will be using Bernie Sanders as a cudgel and a weapon to beat her over the head with. He's being honest about this. You're hiding the ball. He's being honest about this. You're hiding the ball. I think you got to be honest with the American people. There's no way this plan is going to work. You're saying that you're going to raise more money than you're actually going to raise. You're saying that this is going to cost less than what it's actually going to cost. They will hit her on this relentlessly. And whether or not Warren has a glass jaw, you will find it out in the next debate. That's my prognostication. Like, share,